I recently made a video about grabagun.com and how their incompetent employees did not understand what a straw purchase was. So today I want to do a little video to help people understand what is a straw purchase and what isn't a straw purchase. The main thing to remember about a straw purchase is it's a straw purchase when you act as an agent for someone else that is either unable or unwilling to buy the gun themselves. Now, a lot of times people think, well, the person on the other end has to be illegal. They have to not be able to legally own a handgun. But according to some Supreme Court rulings, that's not true. You have to be acting as an agent for someone that's either unable to or just doesn't want to do the paperwork. Now, their reasoning for that is a little bit scary because there's a second reason they use for background checks that is very, very frightening that they use to justify the fact that you could never act as an agent for someone that's unwilling to buy a gun, even if you transfer it to them later. But first, let's talk about what's not a straw purchase. What can you do that isn't legally a straw purchase? Can you buy a gun and then immediately decide, I don't like it, and resell it? Yes, of course you can. You bought the gun with your money, you were the buyer, it's your property, you can then do with it what you like. As long as you follow the federal laws about how to transfer it to someone, if your state has universal background checks, you have to do a background check. If it doesn't, usually you can transfer it to another individual without a background check. If you cross state lines, you always have to do a background check. As long as you follow those laws, you can resell it. Another question I see quite often is, can I loan someone money to buy a gun? Like say my brother-in-law wants to buy a gun this week, but he doesn't have enough money. Can I loan him some money that he later repays me to buy a gun? Yes, you can do that. You can give him money and he can use that money to buy a gun. As long as he goes in, uses money that is now legally his because you loaned it to him to buy the gun and fills out the 4473, that is totally legal. You can give somebody money to buy a gun all you want. That's kind of just like buying them a gift certificate. And you can have them have to pay you back later. You can loan somebody something and they can have to pay it back to you later. It's still legally their money because they entered a contract to where that is now their money until they repay you. Now, the most common question is, can I buy a gun as a gift for somebody? Yes, you can buy a gun as a gift for somebody, as long as you use your own money to buy that gun that you're going to gift to another person. Now, the person on the receiving end of that gift has to be legally able to own a handgun. You cannot give a handgun to someone that can't legally own it. They have to be of age. They have to not be legally disqualified because of a criminal background, etc. But you can buy a gift for someone else. Now, if you live in a state that has universal background checks, when you transfer that gun to them as a gift, they'll have to fill out a 4473 with an FFL and do the transfer. If you give the gun as a gift to someone in another state, they'll have to fill out a 4473 to do the transfer with an FFL. But in most states, if you live in the same state or if you're family members, you can just hand it right to them. You don't have to do anything else. That is your legal right to transfer that property to someone else that can legally own it. As a private citizen, you're able to do that. That is not a straw purchase. Another aspect of giving a gun as a gift is you can go in and pay for a gun and have someone else come in and pick it up. As long as the person who picks it up is filling out the 4473, as long as that gun is being transferred to him, he is the legal buyer. It doesn't matter if the money was his or not. You can buy a gun with someone else's money for yourself, just not for someone else with their money. You can go into a gun shop in your state and say, I want to pay for this gun, have you transfer it to an FFL in another state, and the person that I'm gifting it to can pick it up there. That is totally legal. Now, there is some confusion about gifting because of the Abramski case. A lot of people think, well, the Supreme Court said you can't gift a gun. No, that is not what the Supreme Court said at all. The Supreme Court said he couldn't act as an agent for his uncle. His uncle wanted a gun. This Abramski character, who used to be a police officer, who wasn't anymore because he robbed a bank, said, hey, I can get you a discount on that gun. Just give me the money. I'll go buy it. Now, the uncle lived in Pennsylvania and Abramski lived in Virginia. So what Abramski had his uncle do was write him a check for the gun for $400. And the uncle put in the memo 4 Glock 19. Abramski then went and bought the gun and then went to Pennsylvania and legally transferred it to his uncle. So even though he legally transferred it to someone who could legally own it, he was acting as an agent when he bought it. And the Supreme Court says you cannot act as an agent for someone even if they can legally own the gun. Because the check was written before he purchased the gun, that was evidence that he was acting as an agent. These morons did everything wrong. They did everything in a way to prove they were committing a crime. If they had just not written the check beforehand, if he'd have just waited till after he went to Virginia to get a check for the gun, the check was dated after the purchase, he'd have been in no trouble whatsoever. But because they made him write a check beforehand that said Glock 19 in the memo, that was pretty much documentation that we are committing a crime, you are acting as my agent. That was like a Darwin Award for idiots. The probation he received for that offense, that, like I said, was his Darwin Award. If he'd have bought the gun with his own money, and then said, hey, I'm going to gift this to my uncle because I know he really wants one, he could have went up there and gifted it to him and gave it to him and not gotten any money for it. Or he could have said, hey, I don't like it, and I'm going to bring it to you and sell it to you and do the transfer legally. Then the government would not have had a case. There's no way they could have proved that he didn't buy it for himself and that he didn't like it and that now he decided to sell it, because they'd have nothing to stand on, because everything he did would have been legal because he legally transferred it to his uncle. But like an idiot, they worked it in a way that he was obviously acting as an agent for his uncle. But they also ruled against him because of what they called a second aspect of the law, and that was to help law enforcement know who owns every gun. And to me, that's the scary part I mentioned earlier, and I want to talk about that really quickly. They say that him acting as an agent for his uncle, even though he transferred it to him legally, somehow prevented them from knowing who was buying what gun. And they have to know who buys what gun at all time to keep guns out of bad people's hands. So basically what they're saying there is the second intent of this law is to create a national registry of who owns every gun. It isn't just to keep criminals from having guns, it's to let the police know who owns every gun. So basically they're talking out both sides of their faces. The people on the left side that don't like guns and want these background checks and etc. are saying, we don't want a registry. That's paranoid stuff. That's stuff people on the right who are just whack jobs say. And then they say, well, you can't act as an agent for someone even if they can legally own a gun because that screws up our registry. So which is it? Do you want a registry or do you not want a registry? There obviously is one if doing something like that messes with it. That's the truly scary part. That's the part I hope we see revisited in the future, because that part right there, if you ask me, is unconstitutional. But that is a completely different topic. Tonight I just wanted to talk about what is and what isn't a straw purchase. So to sum it up, you can resell a gun that you bought with your own money for yourself anytime. It can be the next day, it can be the same day, whenever you want to do it. You can also loan someone to buy a gun for themselves, or you can buy a gun for yourself with someone else's money. There's no problem in that. You can also gift a gun to anyone you want to gift a gun to if they can legally own it. You can pay for it and they can take possession of it. There's nothing wrong with that either. But never ever buy a gun for somebody else with somebody else's money. If you buy a gun for them with their money, you are acting as an agent. Whether they can legally own that gun or not, according to the Supreme Court, if you act as their agent, you have committed a straw purchase.